Chapter 1. The Cracks in the Symphony. Scene: the cavernous expanse of the COEX Convention and Exhibition Center in Seoul pulsed with the controlled chaos of a high-stakes production. Global Events was in its element, orchestrating a corporate gala for a tech conglomerate, a spectacle of light, sound, and digital artistry. Tonight, they were pushing the boundaries of what was possible, a testament to their reputation as the industry's vanguard. Ricardo, the video director, stood before the colossal LED wall, a mosaic of vibrant pixels stretching across the stage. His eyes, sharp and discerning, scanned the intricate display, ensuring every transition was seamless, every hue perfect. This was his canvas, his story unfolding in light. Beside him, Sofia, the sound engineer, her brow furrowed in concentration, fine-tuned the audio levels. The air hummed with the resonant thrum of subwoofers, a symphony of frequencies that would envelop the audience. Across the vast hall, Carlos, the lighting designer, moved with practiced ease, his voice a steady cadence guiding his team. The intricate network of spotlights, lasers, and strobes was his domain, a tapestry of illumination that would transform the space. Carlos, a fraction more amber on the stage left wash. Ricardo's voice crackled through the comms. We need to warm up that section. Adjusting now, Carlos responded, his fingers dancing across the lighting console. Sofia, how's the low end on the opening sequence? Solid, Ricardo, Sofia replied, her voice calm and measured. We're hitting the sweet spot. The air crackled with anticipation, a mix of adrenaline and the weight of expectation. This event was a global showcase, a chance to solidify Global Events' dominance. But beneath the surface, a subtle unease lingered. The news had been filled with reports of minor tremors in the region, a geological anomaly that most had dismissed as a passing concern. Without warning, the hall shuddered, a violent tremor that sent a jolt through the floor. The LED wall flickered, its vibrant display momentarily distorted. A collective gasp rippled through the crew, a shared moment of apprehension. Ricardo's heart pounded in his chest, a primal instinct warning of impending danger. Everyone stay calm, he said, his voice strained but firm. It's probably just a minor tremor. But the tremor intensified, morphing into a violent, rolling wave that shook the very foundations of the building. The colossal LED wall groaned, its panels twisting and contorting like a wounded beast. Spotlights swayed precariously, casting erratic beams of light that danced across the panicked faces of the crew. A deafening roar filled the hall, the sound of concrete cracking and metal screeching, a symphony of destruction. Earthquake! Sofia screamed, her voice barely audible above the cacophony. Get under cover! Ricardo, Carlos, and Sofia instinctively banded together, their years of working in high-pressure situations kicking in. They tried to guide the crew towards the exits, but the hall had become a treacherous maze. The LED wall buckled, its panels crashing down like a cascade of broken glass. Spotlights ripped from their moorings, plunging into the crowd below, their incandescent bulbs shattering like fragile dreams. Ricardo felt a searing pain in his temple as a falling panel grazed his head, sending a jolt of agony through his body. He stumbled, his vision blurring, the world tilting on its axis. He heard Sofia's frantic cries, Carlos's shouted instructions, but they were distant, muffled by the roar of the collapsing building. The ground beneath him trembled, and then there was only darkness, a void punctuated by the faint echoes of destruction. Hook. Ricardo awakens to find himself trapped beneath a mountain of rubble, the silence broken only by the faint cries of his injured colleagues. He realizes the earthquake has unleashed a new, more dangerous challenge, one that will test the limits of their resilience and ingenuity. Chapter 2. Echoes in the Rubble. Scene: the aftermath of the earthquake is a tableau of destruction. Ricardo, trapped beneath the rubble, struggles to regain his bearings. The air is thick with dust and the metallic tang of blood. Ricardo's head throbbed, a dull, persistent ache that pulsed with every heartbeat. He blinked, trying to clear the haze that clouded his vision. The world was a blur of greys and browns, a chaotic jumble of concrete and twisted metal. He tried to move, but a sharp pain shot through his leg, pinning him beneath the debris. "Sofia? Carlos?" he called out, his voice hoarse and weak. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint creak of shifting rubble. He strained his ears, listening for any sign of life, but there was only the eerie stillness of a tomb. He remembered the earthquake, the violent shaking, the deafening roar of the collapsing building. The memory was a chaotic montage of images, the swaying spotlights, the crashing LED panels, the panicked faces of his crew. He remembered the searing pain in his temple, the darkness that had swallowed him whole. He shifted his weight, trying to free his leg, but the rubble held him fast. He could feel the cold, rough texture of concrete against his skin, the jagged edges of broken metal digging into his flesh. He tried to stay calm, to focus on his breathing, but the fear was a cold knot in his stomach. Suddenly, he heard a faint sound, a muffled cry that seemed to come from somewhere nearby. "Hello," he called out, his voice barely a whisper. "Is anyone there?" A moment later, he heard a response, a weak, trembling voice that sent a surge of hope through him. "Ricardo, is that you?" "Sofia," he replied, his voice filled with relief. "Where are you?" "I'm here," she said, her voice strained. "Trapped, I think. Can you move?" "My leg's pinned," he said, "but I can move my arms." "Me too," she said. "I think I'm under some kind of metal beam." They talked for a while, their voices echoing in the confined space, their words a lifeline in the darkness. They tried to assess their situation, to figure out how badly they were trapped, how far they were from the surface. "Do you hear anything else?" Ricardo asked. "Just the sound of dripping water," Sofia replied. "And I think I hear someone groaning." "Carlos?" Ricardo asked, his heart pounding. "I don't know," Sofia said. "It's hard to tell." They fell silent, listening to the faint sounds that drifted through the rubble. The groaning continued, a low, guttural sound that sent a chill down Ricardo's spine. "We need to find him," he said. "We need to get out of here." "How?" Sofia asked, her voice filled with despair. "We're trapped." "We'll find a way," Ricardo said, his voice firm. "We always do." He began to shift the rubble around him, searching for anything that could help him free his leg. He found a piece of broken metal, sharp and jagged, and used it to pry at the concrete that held him captive. The pain was excruciating, but he ignored it, focusing on the task at hand. He could hear Sofia doing the same, the sound of her movements echoing through the rubble. After what seemed like an eternity, he felt his leg begin to move. He pulled with all his strength, and with a final agonizing wrench, he was free. He crawled towards Sofia's voice, his body aching, his head spinning. He found her trapped beneath a twisted metal beam, her face pale and streaked with dirt. "Sofia," he said, his voice filled with relief. "I'm here." Hook. As Ricardo and Sofia work to free themselves and find Carlos, they discover that the earthquake has revealed a hidden, dangerous secret beneath the convention center. Chapter 3. The Unveiled Depths. Scene: Ricardo and Sofia, now free from the most immediate entrapment, navigate the treacherous ruins of the convention center, searching for Carlos and a way out. The air is thick with dust, and the silence is punctuated by the unsettling groans of the damaged structure. Ricardo helped Sofia to her feet, her face pale and streaked with dirt. He could see the pain in her eyes, but she stood tall, her determination unwavering. They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing through the rubble-strewn corridors. The faint sound of dripping water echoed from somewhere nearby, a constant reminder of the precariousness of their situation. "Carlos!" Ricardo called out, his voice hoarse. "Carlos, can you hear us?" Only silence answered him, a heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to amplify the fear gnawing at their hearts. They pressed on, their eyes scanning the debris, searching for any sign of their missing colleague. As they ventured deeper into the ruins, they noticed something strange, something that didn't quite fit. The concrete walls were cracked and broken, but beneath the surface, they could see a strange, metallic sheen, a glimpse of something hidden beneath the facade. "What is that?" Sofia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ricardo knelt down, brushing away the dust and debris. He could see it now, a smooth, metallic surface that seemed to stretch for as far as the eye could see. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, a strange, alien material that seemed to hum with an unseen energy. "I don't know," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of curiosity and dread. "But I don't think it's supposed to be here." They followed the metallic surface, their footsteps echoing through the eerie silence. The air grew colder, and a strange, metallic tang filled their nostrils. They felt a sense of unease, a feeling that they were venturing into uncharted territory. Suddenly, they came to a large, open space, a cavernous chamber that had been hidden beneath the convention center. The room was filled with strange, glowing machinery, pulsating with an eerie light. Cables snaked across the floor, connecting the machines to a central console. "What is this place?" Sofia asked, her voice filled with awe and fear. Ricardo stared at the machinery, his mind reeling. He had no idea what it was, but he knew it was something important, something that had been hidden for a reason. As they explored the chamber, they found a door, sealed with a heavy, metallic lock. Ricardo tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. He examined the lock, searching for a way to bypass it. "It's some kind of electronic lock," he said, his voice filled with frustration. "I don't know how to open it." "Maybe we can find a way to override it," Sofia suggested. "There must be a control panel somewhere." They searched the chamber, their eyes scanning the walls and consoles. They found a small panel, hidden behind a tangle of cables. Ricardo examined it, his fingers tracing the intricate circuitry. "This looks like it," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "But I need to bypass the security protocols." He worked quickly, his fingers flying across the panel, his mind focused on the task at hand. He could feel the tension building, the weight of their situation pressing down on him. Suddenly, the lock clicked, and the door swung open. They stepped through, their hearts pounding in their chests. Hook. Beyond the door, they find a hidden laboratory, filled with advanced technology and cryptic research notes, suggesting that the earthquake might not have been a natural disaster. Chapter 4. Whispers of Conspiracy. Scene. Inside the hidden laboratory, Ricardo and Sofia begin to uncover the secrets hidden beneath the convention center. The room is filled with advanced technology and cryptic research notes, hinting at a conspiracy far greater than they imagined. The air in the laboratory hummed with the energy of dormant machines. Consoles blinked with cryptic data, and holographic displays flickered with indecipherable symbols. Ricardo and Sofia moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing through the sterile environment. They felt like intruders in a world they didn't understand. "Look at this," Sofia said, pointing to a holographic display. "These are geological scans, but they're not from around here." Ricardo leaned closer, examining the data. The scans showed a series of deep fissures and fractures, but they were unlike any natural geological formation he had ever seen. They were too precise, too deliberate. It's like someone engineered them, he said, his voice filled with disbelief. They moved to a nearby console, where a series of research notes were displayed on a screen. The notes were filled with technical jargon and scientific terms, but they spoke of a project that involved manipulating the Earth's tectonic plates. Project Chimera, Ricardo read aloud. It's a code name, I think. What does it mean? Sofia asked. I don't know, Ricardo replied, but it sounds dangerous. They continued to explore the laboratory, finding more and more evidence of the project. They found schematics for massive underground machinery, blueprints for seismic weapons, and even recordings of conversations between scientists discussing the project's progress. They were trying to control earthquakes, Sofia said, her voice filled with horror. They were trying to weaponize them. But why? Ricardo asked. What could they possibly gain from that? They found a file labeled Project Chimera, Objectives. Inside, they found a list of goals, including resource acquisition, population control, and global dominance. They wanted to use earthquakes to seize power, Ricardo said, his voice filled with disgust. They wanted to control the world. They found a map of the world, with several locations marked with red circles. Seoul was one of them. They were testing their technology here, Sofia said. The earthquake wasn't an accident. It was a test. But why now? Ricardo asked. Why this event? They found a calendar on one of the consoles, with today's date highlighted. A note beside it read, Phase 1, Activation. They were planning to activate their weapon today, Ricardo said, his voice filled with dread. We need to stop them. But how? Sofia asked. We don't even know how it works. We'll find a way, Ricardo said, his voice firm. We have to. They continued to search the laboratory, looking for any information that could help them understand the weapon and how to stop it. They found a series of encrypted files, but they didn't have the decryption keys. We need to find a way to access these files, Ricardo said. They might hold the key to stopping them. They searched the laboratory for a computer terminal, a way to access the files. They found one hidden behind a panel, but it was locked with a complex security system. This is going to take some time, Ricardo said. We need to find a way to bypass this security hook. As Ricardo and Sofia try to crack the security system, they discover that they are not alone in the laboratory. Someone else is watching them. Someone who knows their every move. Chapter 5. The Watcher in the Shadows. Scene. Ricardo and Sofia are intensely focused on cracking the laboratory security system when they realize they are not alone. A hidden presence watches their every move, adding a layer of suspense and danger to their mission. Ricardo's fingers flew across the keyboard, his eyes scanning the lines of code that scrolled across the screen. He was close. He could feel it. The security system was complex, but he was making progress, slowly but surely. Sofia stood beside him, her eyes scanning the room, alert for any sign of danger. Almost there, Ricardo murmured, his voice tense with concentration. Just a few more lines of code. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the room plunged into darkness. A low hum filled the air, a sound that seemed to vibrate through their bones. Sofia's hand instinctively went to her side, searching for a weapon, but there was nothing. What was that? She whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum. I don't know, Ricardo replied, his voice strained. But I don't like it. The lights flickered back on, but something had changed. The air felt heavier, charged with an unseen energy. They could feel a presence, watching them, studying their every move. We're not alone, Sofia said, her voice filled with dread. Ricardo nodded, his eyes scanning the room. He could see nothing, but he could feel the presence, lurking in the shadows, waiting for them to make a mistake. "We need to be careful," he said. "Someone is watching us." They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing through the eerie silence. They searched the room, looking for any sign of the watcher, but they found nothing. "Maybe it's just our imagination," Sofia said, her voice filled with doubt. "I don't think so," Ricardo replied. "I can feel it." They returned to the computer terminal, determined to crack the security system. They worked quickly, their fingers flying across the keyboard, their minds focused on the task at hand. Suddenly, a holographic display flickered to life, showing a live feed of their location. The feed was from a hidden camera, watching them from a dark corner of the room. "They're watching us," Sofia said, her voice filled with fear. Ricardo nodded, his eyes glued to the display. He could see a figure in the shadows, a dark silhouette that moved with a predatory grace. "We need to find them," he said. "We need to stop them." They searched the room, their eyes scanning the shadows, looking for the hidden camera. They found it hidden behind a panel, its lens pointed directly at them. "They've been watching us the whole time," Sofia said, her voice filled with anger. Ricardo nodded, his eyes narrowed. He knew they were running out of time. They needed to crack the security system, to access the files, to stop Project Chimera. He returned to the computer terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He was close, he could feel it. Just a few more lines of code, and they would have access to the files. Suddenly, the computer screen went blank, and a message appeared: "Access denied." "They locked us out," Sofia said, her voice filled with frustration. "No," Ricardo replied, his voice firm. "They just made a mistake." He typed in a series of commands, his fingers moving with lightning speed. He was a master hacker, a digital ninja, and he wasn't about to be stopped by a simple security system. The computer screen flickered, and the message changed: "Access granted." "We're in," Ricardo said, his voice filled with triumph. Hook. As Ricardo and Sofia access the encrypted files, they discover a shocking revelation. Carlos is not only alive but also deeply involved in Project Chimera. Chapter 6. The Betrayal Within. Scene. With access to the encrypted files, Ricardo and Sofia delve deeper into the secrets of Project Chimera, only to discover a shocking betrayal that shatters their trust and escalates the danger. Ricardo's eyes scanned the documents, his breath catching in his throat. The files were a treasure trove of information, revealing the full scope of Project Chimera. He saw schematics of the seismic weapon, detailed plans for its activation, and even a list of targets, cities marked for destruction. "They were going to trigger earthquakes all over the world," he said, his voice filled with horror. "Millions of people. And Carlos," Sofia began, her voice trailing off. Ricardo turned to her, his eyes questioning. She pointed to a file, labeled Personnel, Subject C-42. Inside, there was a detailed profile, complete with photographs and biometric data. The face was unmistakable. "Carlos," Ricardo whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. He scrolled through the file, his eyes widening with each revelation. Carlos wasn't just a lighting specialist. He was a scientist, a key player in Project Chimera. He had been working undercover, infiltrating global events, gaining their trust, all while plotting their destruction. "He was one of them," Sofia said, her voice filled with anger. "He betrayed us." "But why?" Ricardo asked, his mind reeling. "Why would he do this?" They found a series of encrypted messages, exchanged between Carlos and other members of Project Chimera. Ricardo worked quickly, decrypting the messages, revealing the truth. Carlos believed in the project. He believed that earthquakes were the ultimate weapon, a way to reshape the world, to create a new order. He saw himself as a visionary, a revolutionary, willing to sacrifice everything for his cause. "He's insane," Sofia said, her voice filled with disgust. "He's willing to kill millions of people for his twisted vision. We need to stop him," Ricardo said, his voice firm. "We need to stop them all." They searched the files, looking for any information about the weapon's activation. They found a countdown timer, ticking down to 0. The activation was imminent. "We don't have much time," Ricardo said. "We need to find the control center, shut down the weapon." They studied the schematics, searching for the control center. They found it deep beneath the laboratory, a heavily fortified bunker. "It's going to be heavily guarded," Sofia said. "We'll need a plan." "We'll find a way," Ricardo replied. "We always do." They gathered what they could, weapons and tools they found in the laboratory. They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. As they approached the control center, they heard voices, the sound of guards patrolling the area. They hid in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Suddenly, a figure stepped out of the shadows, his face illuminated by the dim light. It was Carlos. "Ricardo," he said, his voice cold and emotionless. "I knew you would come." "Carlos," Ricardo replied, his voice filled with anger. "Why are you doing this?" "I'm creating a new world," Carlos said, his eyes filled with zeal. "A world free from chaos, a world ruled by order." "You're a monster," Sofia said, her voice filled with disgust. Carlos ignored her, his eyes fixed on Ricardo. "Join me, Ricardo," he said. "Together, we can reshape the world." "Never," Ricardo replied, his voice filled with determination. "I'll stop you, even if it's the last thing I do." Hook. Carlos reveals a hidden failsafe, a secondary trigger that will activate the weapon even if the control center is disabled, forcing Ricardo and Sofia to make a desperate choice. Chapter 7. The Seismic Showdown. Scene. Inside the heavily fortified control center, a tense standoff ensues between Ricardo, Sofia, and Carlos. The countdown to the weapon's activation ticks down, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Carlos stood before them, his eyes gleaming with fanaticism. He held a small device in his hand, a remote trigger that could activate the weapon's failsafe. The room hummed with the energy of the seismic weapon, a low, ominous thrum that vibrated through their bodies. "You can't stop me, Ricardo," Carlos said, his voice filled with conviction. "The world will be reborn, cleansed by the power of the earth." "You're insane, Carlos," Ricardo replied, his voice filled with anger. "You're willing to kill millions of people for your twisted vision." "They are sacrifices," Carlos said, his voice cold and emotionless. "Necessary sacrifices for a greater good." Sofia stepped forward, her eyes blazing with fury. "You betrayed us, Carlos," she said, her voice filled with disgust. "We trusted you." "Trust is a weakness," Carlos replied, his eyes fixed on Ricardo. "A weakness I no longer possess." He raised the remote trigger, his finger hovering over the button. "Any attempt to stop me will result in the immediate activation of the failsafe," he said. "The world will tremble." Ricardo and Sofia exchanged a glance. They were trapped, caught between a madman and a seismic weapon capable of unimaginable destruction. "We don't have to do this, Carlos," Ricardo said, his voice calm and measured. "We can find another way." "There is no other way," Carlos replied, his voice firm. "The time for change is now." He pressed the button. The room shook violently, and the seismic weapon roared to life. Alarms blared, and red lights flashed. casting eerie shadows across the control center. "You fool!" Ricardo shouted, his voice filled with rage. "You've doomed us all." "I have freed us all," Carlos replied, his voice filled with triumph. "The old world is dying, and a new world is being born." He turned to a console, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He was activating the weapon's main sequence, initiating a series of earthquakes that would devastate the planet. Ricardo and Sofia moved quickly, their actions a blur of motion. They had to stop him, to shut down the weapon, to save the world. Sofia lunged at Carlos, her hand outstretched, trying to grab the remote trigger. But Carlos was too fast. He sidestepped her attack, his eyes gleaming with malice. Ricardo moved to the console, trying to override the weapon's controls. But the system was locked down, protected by a complex security protocol. "You can't stop me," Carlos said, his voice filled with glee. "The power of the earth is mine." He pressed another button, and the room shook even more violently. The seismic weapon pulsed with energy, its power growing with each passing second. Ricardo and Sofia were thrown to the ground, their bodies battered by the tremors. They struggled to their feet, their eyes fixed on Carlos, their determination unwavering. "We won't let you do this," Ricardo said, his voice filled with resolve. "We'll find a way to stop you." He lunged at Carlos, his fist clenched, his eyes blazing with fury. Hook. As Ricardo and Carlos engage in a desperate struggle, Sofia discovers a hidden override switch, a last chance to stop the weapon and save the world. Chapter 8. Resonance and Redemption. Scene. The control center is a whirlwind of chaos. Ricardo and Carlos are locked in a desperate struggle, while Sofia races against time to activate the override switch. The fate of the world hangs in the balance. Ricardo's fist connected with Carlos's jaw, sending him reeling. But Carlos recovered quickly, his eyes filled with a fanatical fire. He lunged at Ricardo, his hands reaching for his throat. "You can't stop me," Carlos screamed, his voice filled with rage. "The world will be reborn." Ricardo dodged his attack, his body moving with a speed born of desperation. He grabbed Carlos's arm, twisting it behind his back. Carlos cried out in pain, but he didn't give up. He kicked out with his leg, sending Ricardo stumbling. Sofia, meanwhile, had found the override switch, hidden behind a panel on the wall. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the switch, her eyes fixed on the countdown timer ticking down to 0. "Just a few more seconds," she whispered, her voice strained. Carlos broke free from Ricardo's grasp, his eyes blazing with fury. He grabbed a metal pipe from a nearby console, his grip tightening. "You've ruined everything," he screamed, his voice filled with hate. "I'll make you pay." He swung the pipe at Ricardo, his aim true. But Ricardo ducked under the blow, his body moving instinctively. He grabbed Carlos's arm, using his momentum to throw him against a console. Carlos crashed into the console, his body crumpling to the floor. He lay there for a moment, his eyes glazed, his breath ragged. Sofia flipped the override switch, and the seismic weapon shuddered, its energy dissipating. The alarms fell silent, and the red lights dimmed. "It's over," she said, her voice filled with relief. Ricardo turned to Carlos, his eyes filled with sadness. He reached out his hand, offering to help him up, but Carlos slapped his hand away, his eyes filled with resentment. "You don't understand," he said, his voice weak. "I was trying to save the world." "You were trying to destroy it," Ricardo replied, his voice firm. Carlos shook his head, his eyes filled with confusion. I don't know anymore," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He closed his eyes, his body limp. Ricardo and Sofia stood there for a moment, their eyes fixed on Carlos, their hearts heavy. They had stopped the weapon, saved the world, but at a cost. They had lost a friend, a colleague, a brother. They left the control center, their footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. They emerged into the daylight, their eyes blinking against the bright sunlight. The city was in ruins, but the people were alive, their spirits unbroken. They had survived, thanks to the courage and determination of two ordinary people who had found themselves in extraordinary circumstances. In the aftermath, global events worked tirelessly to rebuild, to restore the city, to heal the wounds left by the earthquake. They honored those they had lost, remembering their sacrifice, their dedication, their passion, and they celebrated those who had survived, their resilience, their strength, their spirit. They had faced the darkness, and they had emerged stronger, wiser, more united than ever before. The end.